Hello everyone, Brock here.
D here.
And this is
Co-op Critiques.
And today we're going to be taking a look at The Spoke Kishibe Rohan, a spin-off of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 4, and it just released on Netflix.
Yes, it is very, very fun. It's only 4 episodes long, and today we're going to be doing a very quick spoiler-free review for those of you who have seen it but maybe haven't gotten the time to watch and you're like, oh, is this worth my time? We're going to be giving you our thoughts on that, and then we're going to be going through each episode, giving you our opinions and discussing them. As always, my friends, art is subjective. Your opinion is valid, my opinion is valid, Brock's opinion is valid, and if we don't agree, that's totally fine, and if we do, awesome! Let's have a really respectful discussion down in the comments because we love hearing your thoughts.
So a little bit of background here. I'm sort of a huge JoJo fan. I've read parts 1 through 6, just started 7 recently. It's awesome, and I've seen the entire anime so far.
I have not. I like the JoJo that I've seen. I've seen like the first or second season, but I'm not the biggest JoJo fan. I haven't delved deep into the anime and the manga, so I'm coming into this show a little bit blind, not knowing where it fits into the overall story. Yeah. So it takes place between Part 4 and Part 5, but it's mostly a spin-off of Part 4. You see a lot of cameos of our favorite characters from Diamond is Unbreakable. These are OVAs, original video animations, and there are only 4 episodes released between 2017 to 2019, and this now on Netflix is just a collection of those 4 episodes. So Araki, actually, Hirohiko Araki, who made the series, decided, oh, I want a series that's kind of horror, very Twilight Zone, very Twin Peaks, and it follows these separate stories, but maybe I should just make it a JoJo spinoff. And he decided to take Rohan Kishibe and the wonderful storyteller in the series and tell these new stories through that character, but originally he wasn't planning on doing that. Yeah, that's really cool to know. I didn't know that. I did like Kishibe Rohan because you can immediately tell that this character is a manga artist. If you look at his design, he's got the tips of fountain pens all throughout his clothing. His earrings are it. His collar is sometimes the fountain pen, and his shoulders as well. So it was really cool. You can tell his occupation just by looking at him. I also haven't seen many anthology anime. If you have, let me know what you've watched. I've personally seen Mushishi and Hellgirl. I love Hellgirl. So those are the 2 episodic anthology ones that I can think of. I do happen to like them because you can watch an episode and then just sort of move on. You don't have to commit to like a full series or anything like that.
Right, and you can totally do that here too. I mean, they're all 4 20-ish minute episodes, and we loved it, to be honest. We'll say we loved it, and it jumps around, and you can actually see when the episode begins. Episode 1 is actually labeled episode 16, and episode 2 is labeled episode 2, episode 3 is labeled episode 5, and episode 4 is labeled episode 9, because Araki really wanted to hammer home that it doesn't really matter what order you watch these in, they're all just snippets of Rohan Kishibe's life and the adventures that he's gone on. And so I guess because that's what the mangaka said, you can just feel free to click which episode you like, but you might as well watch all of them because we really liked it. Now, Rohan Kishibe was introduced in Part 4 of JoJo. Diamond is Unbreakable. There are 8 parts. They're all fantastic. And the thing about Rohan Kishibe is he is a mangaka, a manga artist, and he's sort of a minor character, even kind of an antagonist a bit in Part 4, but he's personally my favorite character. I love his style, his passion and confidence for what he does, and he really just visits the town and is sort of just a citizen there so that he can find inspiration, and you see that in the series as well. Every location he goes to, he's really just thinking, how can I use this ghost story or this story or that location for my next manga? And that's really exciting to see.
Yeah, so as someone who hasn't really been that informed about JoJo, so there's an ability that Rohan has called Heaven's Door, and that's called a stand, correct?
It's a stand because they stand beside you in battle. The first 2 JoJo parts, which you're familiar with, are actually more horror based, but they're also kind of actiony. You battle vampires and things like that.
Yeah, and there aren't stands in there.
Right, exactly, right. And part 3 begins that tradition, and part 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, I believe as far as I'm concerned, basically continue the tradition of having stands in this battle anime, episode to episode. How do we fight this enemy and get to our ultimate goal? And yeah, they're great. You love part 1 and 2.
I really like part 1 and 2. They're really good, but I really liked the introduction of stands. It kind of made me think of, even though the person themselves doesn't have it, the spirit that they're tied to does. So it kind of made me think of quirks in My Hero Academia, how everyone's is different.
Exactly, totally unique. It's like your spirit. So Rohan's, you call him Kishibe Rohan or Rohan Kishibe. It's the Japanese. You know, you can use either way of the name. And Rohan can use Heaven's Door, which basically turns you into a book. Not like a book, but you become paper and he can read any part of your life. It's very intrusive, almost a naturally villainous kind of ability, but he uses that to get an inspiration for his stories, and he can even write in your book and kind of change your life around or how you perceive things, and it's extremely OP, and he doesn't do too much of it in this series. He doesn't use the stand too much, and it feels very JoJo in a lot of ways, but in a lot of other ways it does feel more just like an anthological horror type story. So I think anyone can just hop in, give it a try, watch it, just know that stands are the sort of background superpower that he has, but just enjoy the stories that are told in each episode.
Yeah, I definitely didn't feel like I lost that much from not knowing a lot of the backstory, and luckily I did have Brock there telling me, oh look, there's that cameo. And,
it's Josuke.
That's that character.
It's Okuyasu. Look, he's there. Koichi.
We'll talk more about each of the characters that do have a cameo as we get into the spoilery part of our discussion. But in terms of our spoiler-free review, I think that it's important for everyone to know that little bit of backstory, so it's a little bit easier for you to jump right into this show. Something that I really enjoyed, it's very stylized. I loved the art. It was really cool. I loved how some of the episodes had little panels that they inserted that made it seem like it was straight from the manga. That was really cool. I loved the texture. It's very graphic. And from what I can remember from the first parts of JoJo, the men are less gigantic now,
yes.
which like there is like an evolution of his style as he's written this. Because how long has JoJo's been going on?
The manga's been out since '87, and this spin-off manga started actually in 1997. So yeah, it's been going strong for well over 30 years here. He's still writing part 8 as of this video.
I can see why, because it's just really cool.
So good.
And it's not a comedy. It is very serious, and there's horror, and it's a thriller, and there's supernatural elements. But the situations are so absurd, even
ludicrous, bizarre even.
That I did find myself giggling at the notion of the situations that Rohan is describing.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like funny per se, and I was on the edge of my seat being like, oh no, what's going to happen at the end of this episode?
Some of these episodes are slow builds, gradually and gradually, and the music is always behind it, just being horrifying or actiony or just in your face. And then other times it's kind of like, okay, I'm seeing the pieces are here, and boom, huge twist, like Twilight Zone, and like, whoa, that's what that means, and so it feels really good to watch, and they're all very varied. Yeah, I don't want to go into it too much for the review,
but it's very interesting. Each episode is different, and I think that you would like it a lot. So, we give it a
9 JoJo poses out of 10. Yes. So good.
Yeah, it's really good. Go ahead and watch it. Tune out of the video if you haven't. Watch it, and then come on back because we are entering
the discussion portion. We're gonna go through each episode one by one, chronologically, 1 to 4, just breaking down our thoughts. We have our trusty notebooks here as always.
And we also have shrimp coffee that we will be spilling because
we're spilling the coffee. You know the old popular
yes, indeed.
the old popular phrase, we're spilling the coffee on these episodes.
we are sipping coffee. We really want this to just feel like we're all just chatting about this show we really like. We're all friends here.
Yeah, so for all the JoJo fans, go watch it, come back, and then let's hop in and let's talk about it. So starting with episode 1.
Episode 1, which is numbered 16, as Brock mentioned 16. Before, and it's called At a Confessional.
There you go.
What did you think?
At a Confessional, very horror-esque, a very good start to the series. The religious aspect, because Rohan's stand is heaven's door, and it's interesting to see Rohan, but you still always have the absurdity and the comedy. He's visiting Italy. He says, oh, this is a concessional. I'm not allowed to, but I'm gonna take pictures. I'm gonna hop in. I'm gonna touch it. I'm gonna have a lot of fun, get inspired, and he goes on the wrong side. And it has to play the priest and listen to a story. So it's the best day of his life, because how lucky that he gets to hear someone's tale.
Yes,
that's super cool.
He goes to Italy, and we have that one character who asks him to write in the fact that he has been able to speak Italian his whole life.
Oh yes, of course.
Who is that character?
We always start at the cafe. You're absolutely right. The cafe, it's kind of like a frame story, and then he's telling Koichi in this episode about his trip to Italy. And Koichi says, "Please, dude, it'll take you 5 seconds. Just book me and say Koichi can speak fluent Italian." And Rohan's like, "No, I don't think so. I don't want to do that. I don't feel like it." But let me tell you this story about myself. Because Rohan's always like kind of conceited, and he's so focused on his own stuff all the time, and I gotta love it about him.
Yeah, we have his the editor character. This is jumping forward a little bit.
Right.
The editor character in episode 3 even mentions that trait of Rohan's personality when she's like, "Please be respectful and don't talk up yourself so much."
And she just manipulates him. She's like, what if there was a cool story out here and maybe you could visit and help me become rich?
Yes. So the first one in the confessional, at first I didn't know what to expect, and it is, I think, much better on a second watch, because then you're able to see how tragic the situation is, because it starts off with a man telling about his youth, where he worked at a food factory.
Yeah, he was carrying corn sacks.
Corn sacks every day, and he never had time for a relationship because he had all this manual labor. And then a person comes up and he says, "I haven't eaten for 5 days. Please, oh please, will you give me some food?"
Yeah, can I have your sandwich that's sitting right there? And he immediately is just so like, "That's my sandwich, you can't have it, I'm working hard here." And he says, come do this work with me, and then I'll feed you after. And it's very terrible a character for him to do things like this, because he said, it's my food, I'm not gonna help you do all this. And then he sits and he doesn't help the homeless man work, and then the homeless man is too stressed and he just dies because he's starved and it's too much labor. And there's a real moral of the story here of like, just don't be a bad person. And he was like, "Oh, I'm working here and this isn't fair." And then he immediately forces someone else to do all of his work, and he's not empathetic with the situation. And then the old man passes, the old homeless man, and then he curses the sack carrier.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I did love that moral, because the man didn't even stop to think that the same system that was causing him to do all of this manual labor was what had caused this homeless man to go without food or any sort of resource to help him have a good life. So then we get the backstory that this man then went on to have a whole streak of luck. He had a bunch of fortune. He gained money. He married a supermodel. He had a beautiful little daughter. And then, as the man who was dying, when the man died and he cursed him, he said, "I will visit you again on the happiest day of your life." And when he's hanging out with his daughter,
once again makes me laugh, because he's like, "Wow, this is the happiest day of my life."
And then immediately,
and then it's like, go, and it's so JoJo, and it's very dark, and his daughter becomes this twisted, possessed demon with a tongue that has a mouth and face and like hands, and it's very horrifying imagery, which Hirohiko Araki is so good at. And then there's a very JoJo battle, or like a very Yu-Gi-Oh-esque death game, and this possessed child looks at the cursed father and says, you need to toss the popcorn above the lamppost, catch it in your mouth 3 times, and then I'll spare you and I'll basically leave forever, and if you can't do it, then I'll just kill you where you stand.
Yes, because he assumed that if he couldn't complete this task, then fate did not smile upon him on this day. And you would think that a battle about catching popcorn in your mouth wouldn't be like
exhilarating,
the highest stakes that you've ever seen, but my goodness, it is.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying it's very early Yu-Gi-Oh! Because if you read the manga of Yu-Gi-Oh! At least, he just walks around and challenges people to these insane little games.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And yeah, he does, and then he'll send you to the Shadow Realm and end your life if you mess up. He usually does it with bad people, but also this guy is a bad person. Like, he's not a great person.
And at the end of the episode, Rohan even says that he mentions that he didn't have the best of hearts, but he was a resilient spirit nonetheless.
Yeah. Only someone as like kind of selfish and conceited as Rohan is like, I really respect this man and how he's cunning, and he did survive this death game, you know, spoilers, at the cost of his servant's life. So now the bodies are stacking up, but the man continues, and he's racked by this guilt. That's why he's at the confessional. But he survives, lives another day, and then the ghosts, both of them now, cursing him and saying, we will get you again another time, watch your back. They even enter the church because he's protected nowhere, and they even say, like, we'll get your daughter, we'll take everything from him.
I don't want to say I enjoyed that part, but I did like the notion that they went from cursing him to cursing his daughter, saying that they would come back when it was his daughter's happiest day, because it does go into that theme of, you know, having to pay for the sins of your parents, and the way that we inherit what our ancestry has done. I think that was just a really nice theme. Do you think that you could have won the challenge?
Have won the challenge? Oh, can I toss popcorn up? Yeah.
You think you could have gotten it all 3 times?
Yeah. He had the sun in his eyes, but you could literally just maybe turn a different way, toss it up, and I think it was a little.
The pigeons
it was a little ludicrous because it's always over the top and fun, but the pigeons were distracting him. They're gonna take his popcorn. But I'm also, when I watch JoJo, especially even this series, I really can't figure out how they're gonna get out of it. They always show a problem, and I'm like, bro, there are birds there and you already tossed it up. But of course, in 1.2 milliseconds, they can figure out a solution of, well, if I throw popcorn all over the ground, the birds will go after that and I'll be able to catch the ones I throw. And then you can't do that now, so just, it's always escalating stakes, and then he fails, and there's not even a beat. He's just boom, dead. The servant is killed.
I did like how the ghost in the possessed daughter's body, like, he wasn't even waiting for the man to speak. He just immediately started clapping and starting each of the 3 trials. And as soon as he failed on the 3rd trial, it was instant decapitation. And that suddenness was a little bit alarming because I wasn't expecting it.
Yeah, and on a first watch, you're kind of like, oh, okay, well, I want the man to succeed even though he kind of did something bad, blah, blah, blah. But on the second watch, you realize, you see that this is actually the servant. It's not actually the cursed man.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about in terms of it becoming more tragic, because as Brock had just mentioned, you realize that the man who the ghost was talking to, who he had thought was the same man who had killed him years prior, wasn't. And the servant was saying so many things. He was saying, I don't know what I did.
Like, I don't know what's happening here. Why is this daughter possessed? And it's so crazy because it's even like the daughter believes that the servant is her father. It's all very complex and twisty and exhilarating and exciting. Episode 1 is fantastic.
Really good, really good.
Yeah.
So then we move on to episode 2, which is actually numbered episode 2. And it's called Mutsu-Kabe Hill.
Mutsu-Kabe Hill. So yeah, here we meet kind of a new character in this one with Minoru Kagomori, his editor. And the editor is essentially like, hey, you know, we're gonna talk about your new work. What are you writing? What are we doing here? And they talk, they nod to the fans again, much like episode 1. And Rohan says, you know, I'm homeless recently, and I've been living with Koichi and things are bad, just as a nod to say, like, remember the gambling game where his house was on fire and he kind of like lost everything? And that's sort of the last last time you see Rohan, he doesn't get a lot of great stuff in the original anime. Like, even though I love him and he's like my favorite character in like all of JoJo, they do him dirty a lot, and he's always losing, and because he's a villain, and then this and that. But that's also why I love them doing this character so much justice, because he's really smart, he's really creative, of course he's talented, and just so he's a little bit conceited, and he's not on Josuke's side, so he always gets the short end.
He isn't a hero per se, because all he wants to do is draw his manga. But there is something charming. I don't know if charming's the right word, but there is something that I enjoy about him, but that I enjoy about characters in general whose whole life mission isn't to save the world, because oftentimes that's what we see with heroes, but all Rohan wants to do is draw his manga, and I think that is laudable in and of itself too.
Totally.
Even though in the second one we see that he could take some extra steps to stop this parasite essentially from spreading, but he just doesn't want to, because why is it his business?
Absolutely. So episode 2, it's one of those that start actiony from the very beginning. We have Naoko Osato, and she's with the gardener, her secret lover Gunpei, and she accidentally murders him with a light shove.
And I will say that when a woman tells you to go, don't grab her by force and try to make her change her mind. And then obviously don't hit your partner. And
yeah, it's terrible.
Your partner shouldn't hit you. No one should hit anyone in a relationship.
Right. So the dude is super abusive. She pushes him off, hits his head, and unfortunately, even though he was being terrible, he dies. And she's like, that's not, like, she's like, I always really actually loved this man.
Yeah, it was a very unfortunate accident.
Yeah, it's terrible. And so then her father and her fiance have perfect timing, and they arrive and they say, hey, sweetheart, what's going on? Like, your fiance wanted to surprise you today, and she's cleaning up blood, she's moving the body, she's freaked out.
She's doing whatever she can to, like, plug this hole in his head that the golf club caused, but it won't stop bleeding.
And that's where you realize this is another supernatural event, that the blood just never stops. It continuously flows no matter what she does. Bandages, cauterizes it, tries to stitch it up, tries to hide him, so much so that when she rolls him up in a carpet and puts him on top of the refrigerator and her fiance finally enters, she still has to hold the blood back from her fiance, and of course naturally she drinks the blood
to stop the evidence
from just pouring out.
Yeah, from pooling underneath her, and her fiance figuring out that she just murdered someone.
So this is by far, in my opinion, the most horrifying episode of the 4.
It's
to see so much infinite blood, and that's her solution, and it works, but it's like, would you really go that far? Would you? Would I? Like, if she killed this person, the only way she could get her life back on track is to just drink this 300 cc's.
We learned that he bleeds 300 cc's if he isn't moved. If he's moved, then we can infer that there would be more. And it's just sad, because we learn, at least from Rohan's inference in it, that these are actually parasites, and that they inhabit a body, and that their whole life's goal is to die in front of somebody, possess them essentially, and then have that person take care of them for the rest of their life, so they never have to do any work by themselves, and then reproduce with that person. And so we not only have a lot of gore in terms of the accidental death and the vast amount of blood pouring out of him, but also with the necrophilia that Naoko does, which is very, very gross and made my skin crawl because I didn't like it.
Absolutely. So out of the 4, this is the most horrifying and kind of my least favorite of the 4, even though it's still so solid. It's really good, and it's particularly redeeming after you see she succeeds. She goes on to marry, be richer than ever. She was already rich for 300 years of her family, but then Rohan comes back. Whenever he's on screen, it just elevates it for me, because I'm like, there's Rohan, he's back, yay, that story was great. But Rohan's here, and he meets the daughter.
Yes.
And she still has, when the first episode's a curse, the second one it's some sort of entity, some sort of spirit conduit throughout these people. You don't really understand it necessarily.
Yeah.
And it's in the daughter, and the daughter just trips and dies in front of Rohan. So he has to,
Rohan says, "It's about to possess me. Oh no, oh no!" And so he uses Heaven's Door, and we learn. Did you learn about this in JoJo's?
I don't think so. So I know Rohan can book you and then write in you, but he actually explains how her words are disappearing
as she's
dying, and if he writes in, he can save her and continue her life. Actually, I kind of don't remember because he's only in a few episodes in part 4. I don't remember if he writes in life to someone. I know he writes in a lot of fun stuff, and he does here, after bringing her back to life, he says, you don't know me, you never met me, if you saw me, you'll never see me again, go away, bye, and so then she's back to life, and she leaves, and he's like, whoa, that was a close one there, and that was a good story, and I'm out of here.
Yeah, I really liked seeing the extent of his Stan's power here, just the fact that not only our lives are written within us, but they fade when we die, but that he's also able to essentially save that person if he writes that the instance which caused their death never occurred. Just really cool stuff.
So cool stuff. It's my favorite part of that episode. The twist, seeing Rohan, seeing how strong he is, seeing like his stand really for the first time in these 2 episodes. It's incredible. I'm
a person that when I watch something, I tend to like mull it over in my mind, and the more that I thought about this episode and what I would do in this situation, the more I was just really, really glad that I wasn't Naoko.
Yeah.
So, any cameos that you saw from other JoJo characters?
Oh, yeah. Episode 2 cameos. I didn't even talk about episode 1. So first of all, in episode 1, we met Yukako, Okuyasu, the old favorites, Koichi. I remember Yukako. Yes, of course, those characters. Yukako had like a different hairstyle, which is important because that's her stand, and all of this nerdy stuff in episode 1 that I really enjoyed. And episode 2, it's really interesting because Josuke does show up, and you heard me screaming. I was like, "There's Josuke!" And she's like, cool, that's awesome.
Is he the main character?
Yeah, I've mentioned Josuke, Jotaro, all those JoJo's the main character, and he doesn't have any lines in this series at all, but he's just sitting there, and I'm like, oh, there he is with his little hair divot thingies and his eyes, super cool, and he doesn't say anything, but that was a nice little cameo for this episode. Episode 4 doesn't have any.
And it doesn't even go toward the cafe.
No, it's not at the cafe. And so, that's episode 2, and I think we're good there.
Yes, least favorite, but that doesn't mean it wasn't good. No. It was just gross as all.
Yeah.
So then we're on to episode 3, which is actually numbered episode 5, called
Millionaire Village.
So this one was incredible. I think it was my favorite. I believe it was yours as well.
Yeah, it was definitely our favorite by far.
It was so good. So again, this is another one that, just like episode 2, starts off with an editor from another magazine asking Rohan for a different one-shot, and this time she's the one who comes with an idea towards him, and she says, hey, so I know about this village, and there's a house on sale that I kind of want to buy. It's 3 million yen, and the cool thing is that everyone who's lived in there went from being just like a lower class person to becoming like a Fortune 500 billionaire, successful CEO of a company.
So you start this episode off, it could be iffy for fans of JoJo because you're like, who's this new character? But I gotta say, I love her design, I love her personality, and you're kind of like, okay, she's explaining this stuff, but then she gets to the mystery of why are they all 25-year-old, sort of like, not very wealthy people, and then they become super rich. So you start to think, okay, why is that? We go to investigate. There's a lot of foreshadowing, and the mise-en-scène, you could see it foreshadows gods and nature and destruction, so that eventually when we get to when it like pops off, it becomes the best episode by far. But the beginning, it's like, oh, okay, there's mystery. They see the bird, and of course, in classic Kishibe fashion, he says, okay, this bird fell out of this nest, and I'm not gonna mess with it. And if it gets taken away by another animal, that's nature.
But she was like, oh, we should save him, and I thought that was so cute because I have a problem. Well, not a problem, but whenever I see an animal who's hurt, I definitely always want to care for it and make sure that it's safe and that it's okay. So that was nice to see. And then we see them enter into into the villa.
Right, and there's even more foreshadowing because she says, okay, Rohan, are you good at behavior? Are you good with your manners? Because they stressed over the phone, it's very important that you're respectful here. This is high-class people, and you need to be good. And he's like, whatever, like, I've got manners, and like, and then it subverts your expectations because then when they get inside, he does do everything perfectly. He knows, to take the jackets off. She helps the shoes. She helps him with the shoes, but essentially then she breaks the 3 rules. But let's talk about the child servant.
I love that design.
The design, wow.
His eyes look like entire galaxies.
Galaxies, like it's cosmic, yeah.
It's so cool. And I don't know, I just really enjoyed it. You could tell already just from looking at him. Again, character design is very important because as soon as you see someone, you attribute certain traits or importance towards them. And so I immediately, as I saw him, I was like, ooh, there's something mystic going on here.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I wrote down in my notebook is that these first 3 episodes have children in them.
Yeah.
And children can be like used a lot in horror tropes as being very
I guess
scary.
they do have
So the first one you have a possessed child that's very exorcist,
you're right.
And part 2 has the possessed kind of child who dies, and then the third one has this servant child, because I don't think it's an adult man or anything, and it's a kid that works through the gods of nature.
Yeah, he's their guide.
And he's very, because of his eyes and his design, he is creepy. He plays like the also generic creepy butler role of like Rocky Horror or anything of like, come inside, the masters are waiting, and so yeah, so children are used. Not in the 4th episode, I don't believe.
I don't think
but
so.
But the first 3, Araki utilizes that kind of trope and genre, and it's just so brilliantly done.
Yeah.
And these things just add up, and like the characters, the designs, the foreshadowing, and then the twist where they hit you that this is also supernatural. We're working with gods here.
And it's the gods of the forest,
and the
that
mountains.
it's called the trial of manners. I feel like if I had more of an understanding of Japanese culture and their traditions, I feel like I would be very on edge. I already was, but it's because they can't do anything wrong.
Right, and the manners of Japan and their culture, so we wouldn't have been able to pass this test whatsoever. I don't think. They're like, don't step on a tatami mat's corners, don't sit in this position in a room, and I'm like, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's always cool to learn because I love learning about different cultures and different traditions and the polite way to do something.
Yeah.
And oh man, the twist that Brock was talking about is the fact that if you do a manner incorrectly, you lose something.
Yeah, well, you're not allowed to live there. You have to leave. And the interesting thing here again is there's another big moral or lesson with if you decide to try again and be rich and successful, then you have to sacrifice something you care about.
Yeah, it's all about you either gain something or something is taken from you.
Right, and so when she messes up, that's not even explained to her, which is super unfair.
Yeah,
she messes up these 3 things. She says, please let me try again. And he's like, okay. But, boom, out of nowhere, it's supernatural. Her mother has a heart attack at the wheel, which, like, crashes, and her fiance's in the car, so they both die.
Brock mentioned this while we were watching. Right. We immediately see, as soon as she picks up the phone, Rohan's pocket is spilling over with blood, and we learn that the bird had died.
Yeah,
because
the
those
bird
are the
they
3
saved.
things.
Right.
Each of the things that are taken from her for the 3 grievances that she did against the forest gods.
And I particularly thought it was brilliant that, of course, a phone call and a death off screen just doesn't hit. So it shows the mother and the fiance, and having that bird there, which was, brought in earlier, and you're like, why is there a bird here? That is the physical thing that you can see and feel and just disgust you and horrify you about the situation. Because just calling on the phone and saying, hey, these people are dead, and she's like, what? That doesn't hit as hard as physically seeing it and understanding how horrifying these repercussions are for wanting to try again.
And then as soon as the guide comes back in, I believe his name was... EQ. So as soon as EQ comes back in, he says, okay, you're allowed to take the test again. And then she goes into shock, and Rohan uses Heaven's Door on him. And this is one of the situations where it's not funny at all, but just the situation, because as he's reading EQ's life and all this stuff, it pops open a new page, and it's like opening someone as a book and reading them without their consent is entirely disrespectful.
Yeah, I've done that a couple times where I'm like, let me read you, and then it just makes the whole situation awkward. It's not very polite.
So it made me laugh in the fact that, of course, that's entirely disrespectful.
Of course, grabbing someone and saying, what are you doing?
Yeah, especially like without their consent, all this kind of stuff. But then she passes. She starts having a heart attack, and Rohan is like, don't do that.
Very Death Note. So our editor, Kyoka Izumi, unfortunately, she passes away in front of him, and he realizes that he has to continue just to save her and rectify the situation. There's really no other choice. He can't just leave. So he decides, okay, I'm gonna bet it all. Try and have manners, and he's such a mannerful. That's another thing where I said is subverted expectations, is because you didn't expect him to actually be good at manners. He's one of those characters.
He does. He's able to logic it out, because his trial is the proper way to eat corn on the cob.
Corn on the cob.
Which, as soon as that came out, you had the corn on the cob replay. I was like, I don't know, because corn on the cob is difficult to do respectfully, because like when you eat it, it's like liquidy, and there's lots of noises. So how do you do it without disrespecting the person?
And ironically, just picking it up with your hands and eating it is the best option. And he tries to throw him off. EQ puts all the cutlery and the utensils and the chopsticks and says, okay, choose one. And he says, with his JoJo pose. He's like, I know better than that. And
you can't get me.
You can't get me. And he picks it up, just eats it normally. And then another twist. When he had opened EQ, he wrote in, oh, you can't even see tatami mats. So then EQ steps on all the corners multiple times, completely being vulgar and disrespectful of the
I felt bad
behavior.
for EQ. Did you feel...
No.
I did. I was like...
Totally.
Oh, poor guy. Because I don't know if Rohan unwrote that, and so I'm just like, is he cursed to just have these gods mad at him for forever?
So for the rest of his life, he can't see the corners of tatami mats, and I think that's great, because you know EQ would have invited another 25-year-old and would have challenged them, and that's not cool. So as much as EQ seems kind of like an innocent kid, just a vessel for the gods, but it's still messed up what he does, and it's still, and that's just how Rohan gets him back. So he saves Izumi, and he bolts right out of there, which I found very respectful of how he didn't care about the villa, staying, winning. He got everyone's lives back, big happy ending, you gotta love it. Even the bird is safe, and
it was
and
sweet.
it just ends on such a great note, and it's just wonderful from beginning to end. Favorite episode.
Always a fan of happy endings. So even though it was like a very tense thriller horror with death and all of these like ominous things, it's still nice for it to end with everyone being okay. And then we're back at the cafe. Any cameos here to let the people know?
Yes, I was just gonna say this is the last time we see the cafe in the series, the end of episode 3. We have Okuyasu with another little Easter egg saying, you know what, you're a freeloader, but come live with me, bro. Like, give Koichi a break, and hey, maybe you can even fix my dad with Heaven's Door. And Rohan's like, oh, you're right, that's so great, I can come and live with you, but I'm not gonna fix your dad. And he's like, what? Why wouldn't you just, it would take 2 seconds, which is a mystery that actually starts at the beginning of part 4, that his dad is kind of this green monster creature that's been cursed to be a horrifying beast thing.
But they don't know how to resolve the curse.
Yeah, it's a whole thing, and it really, it's never resolved, which is funny, of course. And so here it's still funny because it's still not resolved, and his poor dad is still like a monster, and that's just funny. And that's the last we see of our favorite characters until The Run.
The Run, episode 4, also
aka episode 9. Yeah.
So The Run, what I really liked is, again, everyone interprets things differently, but for me, I interpreted it I interpreted it as a commentary on toxic masculinity,
Mm-hmm.
because oftentimes we speak on the incredible standards put upon women, but we don't mention the intense standards put upon men. And men have a lot of things that they need to do or be in order for society to find them desirable. And our character,
Yoma Hashimoto.
Yoma Hashimoto, he begins by being scouted by a talent agency, and he goes from being just like this regular kid, because he's only like 21.
Right, and it's like a metaphor, because then he gets scouted and he becomes a star, and in real life that could, you know, take control of your life and completely change you.
Yeah,
and that's embodied in
Hashimoto, because he becomes obsessed with looking good and having the best physique. And this episode really shows you that men who have to look like that, and it actually made me think, this is a bit of a tangent, it actually made me think of Henry Cavill in The Witcher, with what he had to do with Geralt, because he worked out intensely for forever, and he even mentions that he would go through like water withdrawal so that he could take out all of the water retention, so that his muscles would extremely pop out for every scene. And like that's a lot to demand of a person.
And you see that in a lot of places, like Hugh Jackman and everything, playing Wolverine, and essentially you see these things, and it's even referenced, because Araki loves his references. Most stands are named after band names.
Oh, really?
Yes, they are. And so he loves these references. They reference mangas and other fun stuff all throughout the episodes, but in this episode, the girlfriend of Hashimoto mentions that he looks like Brad Pitt from Fight Club, which is kind of the stereotypical, what every dude, I think, are still in media today. They're like, I want to look like Brad Pitt from Fight Club, because that's just the like epitome of a jacked man, at least back in the day also. So they literally mention that, and you can see it, and it's all throughout being a star, but you gotta go supernatural, you gotta have some fun with it. So he's also possessed by the god Hermes, which takes everything another click up, very, you know, high stakes. But I completely agree with you. The toxic masculinity is seen not only with just his pride in his look, but the competitiveness, how he has to win against just some rando at the gym in Rohan, and says, I have to be quicker with lifting weights, and I have to run faster than you, and like you cheated just because you tapped the table. And so it's the people, and I don't always love that either, with people just super competitive, super prideful, and all of these little things that don't matter can be taken to such a high stake that it could actually lead to people dying, which just happens.
And what happened here with Hashimoto becoming a serial killer, because he murdered not only his trainer's other client, but the delivery man who went to his apartment just to deliver packages that he and his girlfriend has bought, and his girlfriend, who he completely takes advantage of, invades her pride. Yes, another abusive boyfriend. Please do not steal your partner's belongings. Do not take their money. Do not break into their purse or bag and take their credit card.
Because he steals over $3,000 from her and then some, and looks into maybe her diary or her personal things, because he knows that her PIN number is an ex's, like, you know, birthday. And so he's very intrusive. He's very selfish, like terribly, toxically selfish.
It's also really
not Rohan selfish. He's like really abusively terrible.
I completely agree. And what I was going to say was that it's really nice to see the progression of his obsession with every single time we return to her apartment. At first, it's just some weights and the jump rope, and then the second time we see him, it's like a treadmill, I think, but a bunch of exercise things. And then the third and final one, he placed rock climbing things all over to do bouldering.
Yeah, bouldering. I don't know what that is.
She said, she looks at him and she's like, this is my apartment. This is a rental. Yeah. And then just like, you wouldn't think it's so creepy, but Araki somehow made the creepiest thing ever when she asked him to leave, which kudos to you, girl. Good. Get out of there. And he climbs out of the window, and he had glued on rock climbing gear.
Glued onto the outside. She's like, this is a rental, and it's just on the outside of the building too, which not only is creepy and obsessive about how he leaves the building, but it also again foreshadows the end of the episode when he's launched from the building to his own fault of breaking the window and making the stakes so high. He's launched out of the building, and even Rohan says, I know that if I look down, I'm not only going to be disrespecting this man, but he could very likely be alive and just still climbing up. And yeah, so once again, great foreshadowing and theming. So this is solid.
Yeah, very solid. And again, this treadmill race, I was just rooting for Rohan because this man, this is when you see the Hermes thing that we mentioned previously, because his muscles turn into wings behind his ears, on his back, and on his ankles, and he turns around and starts running backwards at 20 kilometers per hour.
Which is so cool.
It was cool, but I was like, oh, what?
It's horrifying. It's monstrous. It's godlike.
Monstrous, yeah.
It's supernatural.
It's insane, and you realize that he's running backwards because he's gonna throw the dumbbell through the thing because he legitimately wants to kill Rohan.
Yeah.
Or up the stakes or make it fair or something, and you. Good thinking on Rohan's part to write in that he presses stop at Rohan's with Heaven's Door, like. Yeah,
so he realizes, you know, this is not just normal obsession. This is not a normal running competition. So he Heaven's Doors, and he sees not only all of the murders that Hashimoto has done, but also writes in. Basically just don't kill me, like just stop my machine and let me get out of here, and I'm never gonna work out again, ever again.
Yeah.
I'm never gonna come back to this gym. That guy's probably alive, he's probably around, and I'm just gonna probably like move to Morio or go like somewhere else so that he's not.
Yeah, he said like the only thing that he can do is run.
And
it was really cool, again, the editing and the shots, because it pans upwards from him leaving towards the little exit sign with the stickman also running away.
And there is
moments like that.
Yeah, and the little stylization of we all know the Jojo meme, the to be continued with the roundabout, and that you see that little arrow that says like episode 4 ended at the bottom of the screen, and I'm just like, oh, that's so Jojo. And the horrifying aspects, like even him climbing out of the window and being like twisted and weird, I'm like, oh, that's very vampire. That's very part 1 and part 2. I think it's very dark, and it's just so well done.
Yeah, it was just a really cool show. I hope that there were more episodes. Like, I feel like I could watch a whole series of this, just more and more, because I love supernatural things, I love anthology, and I love having the ability to check out each story, because these were all so different from one another, and they were unique, and they were captivating, and they were just entertaining to watch.
And more has been written, but it hasn't, you know, been animated. Like I said, it even took a few years to kind of do these OVAs and collect them and put them on Netflix, and maybe they feel now that it's out there, this pressure to animate the other ones and then get those up in a year or two. But I don't see necessarily another one anytime soon, but it's extremely possible that we get another season, because it's out there. It's out there in the manga. And it's gonna be good, I'm sure. Like, Araki wrote it, so I'm sure it's up to standard with these other episodes and stories.
Yeah, I loved the style, I loved the stories, I loved the twists, I loved how bizarre and unique every single bizarre adventure.
It gets me every time. Every time I read a JoJo part or watch an episode, I go, huh, that's weird. It's bizarre. Like, every time, I never learn. I go, oh, okay, so this is the fight, this is the flow, and then I say, wait a minute, that's a weird turn to take. It's JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and it's just a blast. So watch this, and if I may also say, like, watch JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, starting at part 1 and going onwards, and it's been fantastic. I can't recommend it highly enough.
I need to catch up.
Yeah, it's horrifying, but it's also, even part 2 especially, is horrifying and funny. And then if you get tired of those, part 3 is something completely different. It's bombastic action, stand powers, and then part 4, my favorite part with my favorite character, is kind of a murder mystery type deal, and it's not even necessarily connected too aggressively, so I guess you could hop into whatever part you wanted, but I would say just watch it all the way through, read it all the way through. I love JoJo's.
Yeah, I think that this was really great. It really makes me want to go back and watch JoJo's. I just loved Rohan as a character. Yeah. I loved the little pocket stories. I loved how colorful the style was, the music. It was just a good time. It was just a good time. So go watch it. It's nice. It's not too hard. It's very, very short episodes. Yeah. It's only 4 in total.
Yeah, so. At least give it a try, for sure.
So yeah, let us know down below if you have watched them and what your thoughts were, which one's your favorite, which one's your least favorite, and let us know why. We love to hear what you think.
Yeah, let us know if you're gonna watch JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, or if you now seriously have to go watch this. If you love The Twilight Zone, if you love Twin Peaks and all of these inspirations, if you just love manga, anime, all of that, you know, entertainment in general, be sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment, and ring that bell. And yeah, thanks so much for watching another co-op critique.
Yeah, we love to have you here, and we hope you have a wonderful day. Bye!
Bye.